Pre-Dead Social Club has put a bunch of pebbles in the water, and there's a bunch of ripples going out, and people are picking up on it. And like, how do we bring some of these programs to our community?
Yeah.
We're talking about death, but we're rebuilding community.
Right.
This is not a medical conferences or meetings. It's community building.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I go to the Hannaford or grocery store. It's like, I know you. You're a pre-deader.
Right.
I saw you at Death Over Drinks. Cool.
Yeah.
I now see other people in my world that are navigating this as well. It's comforting.
You're listening to Granite Goodness, the show where we interview New Hampshire people making the world a better place. My name is Andy DeMeo, and today I'm coming to you from Treeline Outfitters in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. My guest today is Laura Clemenson. Laura was a speaker at TEDx Portsmouth 2024, and she is the founder of the Pre-Dead Social Club, where she, and today we, talking about death and dying and why we should all strive to be more comfortable talking about death with our loved ones. We also talk about Laura's life, her career, big cell phones for some reason, and she also gave me this great t-shirt, which you can see if you're watching us on video. As Laura might say, we tried to keep the dialogue alive on this episode of Granite Goodness, and I hope you enjoy it. Laura Clemenson, welcome. You all right?
Yeah, I know. Andy DeMeo?
Oh.
See,
this is great.
That's where I just kind of like froze. I'm like,
Demius.
No.
It's DeMeo.
DeMeo.
But I mean, I don't know. I don't really care.
All right.
Like
Andy.
Yeah.
Andy D.
That works.
All right.
Sometimes, I mean, technically there's like an M capitalized, and I think that even like 100 years ago it was DEMAIO. Like there's many of us DeMeo sons lost, scattered across the continent.
Things have shifted based upon situations.
That's right. That's exactly right. And you're Laura Clemenson.
Laura Clemenson.
Welcome to Granite Goodness.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. You're another one of the TEDx people.
True.
Who are some of my favorite people to talk to, because you always have some really interesting thing to get up and talk about on stage, but there's always more to it, right? Like you have to condense all that into 15 minutes or 16 minutes. Does it feel like you're in like a straitjacket a little bit, like, oh, I have all this passion and story I want to tell? Like,
it was an awesome and arduous process, and the ability to synthesize a lot of things swirling in your head to have one or two points to make is a great skill for everybody to try to have. So I'm not going to lie, it wasn't a cakewalk, but
sure.
It was fun eating cake afterwards.
Well, I'll tell you. So I'm going to tell you a story, which I think that you'll like, but you may not like it, and we'll see if you remember. So when you did your talk, which was amazing, I was there and I took my mom. There was a guy who came before you,
Matt Stein.
Yeah, and you got choked up a little bit, which I thought was endearing and showed the level of vulnerability and like strength that you were displaying being up there on stage. And I was thinking to myself, when the other guy got on, he wasn't telling an emotional, like he just got nervous, I think. And I actually really liked what he did. You remember he got up, he froze in his talk, and then he just got off stage and he got back on, which was a great kind of reset. And, I've performed a little bit in my life, like in music and in public speaking. And I know that it's much easier for the people on stage when the audience, like when they feel like the audience is comfortable, when they're engaged, when they're happy, and when they like the person up there, right? So when I saw the Matt guy do that, I thought to myself, oh man, we all watched him be uncomfortable for like 10 whole seconds. I wish that we'd like applauded him or cheered for him or given him some encouragement or something, right? And so I made a little note in my head that, if that happened again later that day, that I would attempt as an audience member, again, knowing what it's like to be up there and to perform, that I would attempt to like get the audience to go, woo, come on, you're doing great,
Yeah.
And that was the thing that I was focused on. So you get up and you begin with your very emotional story. And you're like 10 seconds in and you're like, my mom, got diagnosed with cancer. And
I got choked up.
yeah, right. Which is
Yeah.
like super, super, like obviously who wouldn't? And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to help this woman. I'm going to help her. She's feeling a little vulnerable. I'm going to make her feel comfortable. So I let out a big whoop and I'm just like, woo! Not even kidding. Because I was so focused on like having empathy for the performer. And my wife is next to me. She looks at me. She's like, what the hell are you doing? Because no one else was doing it. And she's like, why are you applauding this, woman's wife's or her mom's cancer diagnosis? And I was like, I wasn't. I was trying to, And I realized it was probably an inappropriate thing to do. But my intentions were good. So I don't know if you remember that moment. If some
I
random
do.
person shouted.
I remember, like, honestly, do I remember the whoop?
Yeah.
I remember something, and
Yeah.
then a bunch of audience members are like, start clapping, and I remember just putting my finger up, like, just give me a minute.
Yeah.
I got it,
Right.
And then I just kind of started over. And the thing is, Matt Stein, I was behind the curtain. I had no idea he walked off and walked on. I didn't know that until later
sure.
on in the day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, good for you, Matt.
Yeah.
To give yourself permission to just recalibrate on your own terms.
Yeah.
And to show up and do the thing that you want to do. Yeah, we all kind of do that differently.
Yeah.
Thank you for supporting me. I didn't know you had that much oomph out there.
Well,
I appreciate that.
I don't know. I mean, it's the sort of thing that like I try to be that person when it's like, all right, if this is the thing I think is going to help make the performance go better, make the person more comfortable, like I don't mind being a little uncomfortable for a moment. I don't mind screaming
Right.
when everyone else is quiet. And I was so focused on that I didn't think, oh, she just talked about her mom's cancer. She probably thinks that's what I'm applauding. It's not. I'm trying to applaud, her being on stage and doing a good job. So anyway, I wanted to say that to you for months. I felt like this is the right opportunity.
Yeah, I love it. I felt probably a lot of the speakers just. I think if there was a spray, little aroma in the air, it was like empathy.
Yeah.
Empathy and support for
Right.
anybody getting up there. That's not to diminish your whoop, by the way.
You can diminish it. I shouldn't have done it. I regret it. No, I
do
don't.
not. You do not.
No.
I wouldn't regret it.
I'll put more thought into my whoop next time.
I think you got to whoop when the whoop shows up.
Yeah.
I've whooped.
You seem
I'm
like
a
a
whooper.
whooper. You
I'm a whooper.
You seem like a whooper to
Yeah.
me. I had a feeling you'd appreciate that. All right. Enough whooping. We're done whooping for now. I always like to open these after the salutary whooping conversation because I always applaud people randomly and regret it later. Can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with like New Hampshire, the Granite State? You said you've listened to some episodes, so hopefully you should be used to this question. And you said you have a farm, like that's pretty interesting. But tell
Yeah.
me about Laura in New Hampshire. What's going on with that?
Yeah.
It's fine if you don't live here.
So I am not a New Hampshireite by birth.
Neither am
I moved out here in 1987 to help two guys start a telecommunications company.
No kidding.
Yeah. It was long before there were cell phones. I don't know if you even
Weren't they
know
like
that.
this big
They
in
were like
1987?
little suitcases.
Yeah.
And
I would love to have one of those.
no, you wouldn't. No, it was they were heavy, and yeah, it was me and two guys came out here and set up shop on Congress Street. Atlantic Connections is the name of the company.
Yeah.
And I liked it so much that even after left that organization, it's like New Hampshire is awesome.
So when you say you liked it,
I
tell me
liked
about
it. Oh,
it.
5 miles to the beach, an hour to the mountains, maybe 2 hours, hour to Boston, hour
Yeah.
to Portland, 4 hours to New York. I'm like, it has everything.
Yeah.
And it was very different where I grew up in Wisconsin on a farm,
Yeah.
400 people. So, yeah, I call it home. I've lived here more than I've lived anywhere.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And you don't still have one of those like giant cell phones lying around somewhere, do you?
No, okay, so this is a funny thing. The owners were going off on a trip and they gave me the bag cell phone. They said, you are responsible for this if there's an emergency for, the issues.
Like the nuclear football they
yeah.
give the president.
And I'm just like, who wants to be this accessible at any time?
Yeah.
That is why I don't work in the stock market.
Right.
Yeah. So,
And that was, you had that and this was like 1989, you were thinking that.
yeah.
Wow.
I was
So you were ahead.
I was ahead of how do we unplug.
Yeah.
So I'm still trying to figure out how to completely unplug, and I'm sure there are a lot of people in that same court.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I had a flip phone for a year, which sounds crazy now, but I loved it.
The flip phone.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you still have random phones in drawers?
Yeah. That's you don't know it yet, but under the table over there is a giant inflatable cell phone that we're gonna break out later. No, well, my first phone was a flip phone, like when I was 11,
Right.
And that was
Oh,
great.
you got a phone at 11?
Well, it was like,
Middle school? No.
yeah. I was in
All right.
6th grade.
All right.
Which I'm glad it wasn't a smartphone, like that. I felt like would be a lot at that age. I didn't get a smartphone until I was 18. Just, I don't think they had been invented yet or whatever.
Did you text your parents?
On my phone, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Did
yeah,
you
yeah.
teach them how to do it, or did they teach you?
No,
or-
they taught me.
Fascinating.
They taught me,
All right.
and I remember all the. It's funny that kids now, they don't even understand like the text jargon, like you instead of YOU, or
Right.
PC instead of peace. If people say peace out, still I don't know, Like sometimes I'll be texting people a little bit younger than me, and they'll be like, they'll say, why are you texting that way? Like, why are you breathing these words? And I'm like,
Right.
what do you mean?
Yeah.
Because I used to have 9 buttons, whatever.
I had to hit one button 20 times to get to the right letter.
Oh my God.
No, I'm exaggerating.
Well, I mean,
that's
the character button you did, to
Yeah.
get to period, comma, exclamation, question, like you had to go do.
I know.
It's very important that you get it right.
Wow,
'Cause it
just
changes
the
character.
effort that went into communicating as opposed to you could actually use the phone to talk
Right.
and leave a message.
Yeah, imagine that.
But the texting, that was crazy. Anyhow,
Yeah.
communicating.
We could talk all about that. Mm-hmm. That is actually pretty cool though, right? In that you, like, psychologically, you kind of saw, and maybe you weren't thinking of it as like, this is how the future is going to be, but like, we're at a very interesting time culturally and technologically where I think a lot of people, they do think in those terms. I mean, I'm one example. I can tell you everyone in my generation, they're always thinking like that of like, man, smartphones are great, but how do I get off it?
Mm-hmm.
It's too much. It's too much stimulus. Even to and what I did of having like, a flip phone, a piece of archaeology as like an experiment for a year, like that's a little extreme maybe, but I enjoyed the heck out of it.
I bet you did.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, it's a new thing. I don't know. I think I've always been a little on the cautious side of this types of technology that remove us from face-to-face communication. I remember my daughter was born in 1990, and so she's, I don't know, perhaps close to your
I'm
age.
95, so she'd be 5 years older.
Yeah.
My sister's age, basically.
And I just said, I'm kind of worried about your generation on how people are going to actually learn the social skills when we've got this technology that comes between us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've just been big into communication no matter what career path I've ever had.
Right.
And I like to think that people are becoming a little bit more conscious of it. But the fact that there's studies going on right now of how things are negatively impacting us, I don't know, we could probably go down this wormhole for another day.
Yeah. Well, it's relevant though, you know. I mean, this is actually good. Like, this is context that I didn't have, right? Even as a viewer of your talk, right? That, you know, actually you've worked in the field of communications at some level, and you've had an abiding interest in it for a very long time, right? And I feel like it's the sort of sequence of experiences that, you know, and again, I want to hear your opinion on it, but like, when you started the Pre-Dit Social Club, in a way, you might have been preparing for that for a long time. You just didn't know it, you know? And
Yeah.
it's like, oh,
I
actually.
like the fact that you said abiding interest. That sounds so cool. And I do believe that everything that I've done in my life thus far, professionally and probably personally, has prepared me for starting a social club to talk about death.
Yeah. Which is a very interesting sentence.
Yeah.
Let's dig into that a little bit. So, you know, you got your TEDx talk. I'll link that in the notes and all that, and everyone should watch it. But, you know, can you give us like the Reader's Digest version, which sounds awful because it is a super personal and really great thing. But, you know, what's the Pre-Dit Social Club? I've got this T-shirt on.
Yeah.
People are going to see it. Like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
You know.
So the Pre-Dit Social Club, the Reader's Digest version is, yes, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer 8 years ago. And in Wisconsin,
I'm not whooping this time.
Not whooping.
Not whooping.
Whooping. My dad and my sister were right there to support her, and I was traveling back and forth. My mom, as I kind of alluded to in my TED Talk, was just amazing in dealing with her mortality. And my dad and my sister supported her, but wanted no conversation about death and dying. And even years after my mom died. And I was just like, how is it that we're all under the same roof for like 18 solid years?
Yeah.
And we never really talked about death. And why is it that I feel so unprepared? And it's because everybody in my family died instantly.
Right.
We never had to care for anybody until my mom was diagnosed. And then my dad's health started to change. And I started to try to chat with him about supporting him, and he wanted nothing to do with it. And I was like, whoa, all right. So I did this deep dive on death, dying, and end of life. I'm like, I need more skills. And then I just realized, after becoming a death doula, which is a non-medical support person for people at end of life,
Right.
navigating that, okay, we're not unique. There are a lot of families that are just not on the same page. And I decided that instead of going out into my community and offering services as a death doula and a hospice volunteer, that I'm going to get burnt out just like all the other medical professionals.
Right.
I will receive people. This is a glittering generality, I understand, because there are people who are not in this bucket, but I don't think that many. I'll keep receiving people that are not prepared and in denial. And I think I want to try to do something different.
Yeah.
And so this really was a social experiment. I drew this logo, came up with the words. It needed to be happy
It's
looking.
really cool.
I love the Venn diagram,
Yeah.
the Venn diagram aspect
I'll
of
post
things.
a picture of it, but I want people to see.
There's some humor to it.
Yeah.
And
When this image first popped up during your talk,
Yeah.
it was like a light bulb. Like, you could feel it in the audience. It was like, oh, this lady's serious. She's put thought into it. It's funny. It's, you know, it's intentional. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's the right balance of things.
Thank
to
you.
talk about it, you know.
Well, I wrote a letter to 200 people. I sent them a sticker and I said, this is what I'm doing. I'd like to see you. And in 18 months, there's close to 700 people
Wow.
that have plugged into what we're doing.
That's a
We
lot.
have about 400 people that have attended our events more than once. And there we are. I basically say we're rebuilding community.
Yeah.
We used to know how to support people. Medicine has gotten complicated. We live farther away. People are
Yeah.
living longer. The environment that we used to know how to do this looks very different than it does right now.
Yeah.
It turns out there are a lot of people that are like, oh, thank God that you exist, because also I hear a lot, nobody else in my family wants to talk about it.
Sure.
Or that they don't have family, or they never had children or married. So there's all over the place. Or they're
Yeah.
just trying to navigate things and kind of practice conversations with strangers before they have more intense conversations with their family.
Right.
So it's a thing.
It's a thing, all right.
Yeah.
And I imagine too, like I think everyone on some level can relate to this, right? That in some ways it's easier to open up to someone who is kind of a stranger, right? Than it is like if you're going to talk about the mother of all heavy subjects, dying, right? Like the end of a life. I feel like when you talk about that with a family member, and it's not an easy conversation, or you don't have a conversation, but like it's almost the baggage of that relationship is almost about everything that hasn't been said, right? Whereas if you're just talking to a stranger about it, I don't know. You can, I've never talked to a stranger about dying. Right. You're freer. All the baggage isn't there.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't have to sort through all the landmines on the floor, and the bags, and all the other things. And when you get together with a group of folks at like Death Over Drinks, where you don't need to drink, but we ask you to talk about death. We talk about one topic at a time, and people lean in, and they're like, "Oh, you think that way? That's fascinating." And I should say, the folks that show up are in their mid-30s to their mid-90s, and that is part of the mission of the Pre-Dead Social Club, multi-generations.
Yeah.
So when the 40-year-old is sitting at the table with a 90-year-old and they're thinking about their grandparent, and or vice versa, because you know what? Death shows up. It doesn't really care what age you are, right? We have somebody at Death Over Drinks who's in her 90s, and her daughter-in-law has a terminal diagnosis, and she's reflecting on how she's navigating.
Wow.
And we're having, so this is a really holistic perspective that when people leave Death Over Drinks, I can, like, people actually say this, especially for the first time. I wasn't quite sure what to expect, but I'm like, I feel lighter. I'm like, right, people laugh. There's laughter, and there's tender moments, even though it's not a grief session.
Yeah.
It is. People are super supportive. And then what you see is all of a sudden somebody shows up a couple months later and they've brought their neighbor, or they've brought their spouse or a friend. And it's a ripple effect.
Right.
And people report back. There's no reporting. People
Report
comment.
on your conversation.
Yes. There's no forms.
Right.
That they used some, because we also just talk about the beauty and the tool of let a story be your wingman.
Sure.
It's like, you don't have to tell people you went to this thing called Death Over Drinks.
Yeah.
You don't have to say you're hanging out with the Pre-Dead Social Club. Just say, hey, I was somewhere the other night.
Right.
And this person was talking about the story. Hey, mom, hey, dad, what would you do in that situation?
Yeah.
And, or, hey, spouse or friend. And you don't have to expect an answer, because these conversations are a marathon. This is not a sprint.
Yeah.
It's a series of things, and trying to figure out what is the way in? How do you kind of like crack the code? I'm going to say something that's perhaps kind of weird.
You can say it.
Okay.
This is the place.
So I remember somewhere in my box of stuff at home,
Everyone's got a box
of stuff. I got a box of stuff, and I was in college, and it was a cartoon, and in the cartoon was a big female egg,
Yeah.
and there's a bunch of sperm around the egg trying to get in.
Okay.
And one of the sperm is like, a special delivery, ma'am. And
Right.
I feel like that's kind of like these conversations about death and dying.
Yeah.
You're just not quite sure what's the thing for somebody to open the door. Is
Right.
it the FedEx? Is it flowers? Is it a card? Is it a meal?
Right.
Is it talking about something that happened to somebody else? We just don't know. So we shouldn't get discouraged if that first conversation goes nowhere.
Yeah.
Try something else.
Yeah.
Is that a weird analogy?
No, not at all.
I just,
It's very apt.
yeah.
You know, I like that very much. It almost makes you wonder, and you know, you've certainly thought about this more than me, but I kind of feel like the process, it's one of those things that the process is the goal, right? Like the goal, I mean, obviously, you know, who wouldn't want for every person when they die to be at peace, to not be in pain, to be content, right? Like, sure, that's a functional goal that, you know, maybe you can reach for, and I'm sure this helps.
Utopia. We want that.
Right, yeah, exactly.
I mean, we
Everyone-
want that for ourselves and other people.
Yeah.
It's imperfect. Life is imperfect. So why do we think, you know, there's this phrase out there, a good death.
Yeah.
Which I find like, you know, okay, that's cool, but we can't guilt anybody if they didn't have the death that we think that they should have,
Right.
right? So I have come to hope that regardless of reactions that one might have for any of these conversations, you might never get the reaction that you're hoping for.
Yeah.
But on somebody's deathbed, let's just deathbed, that they're like, you know, that thing that you said, I would like that. I'm like, awesome.
Right.
It can come at the last minute as long as perhaps something comes,
Right.
you know? And it's not up to us to dictate what that timeline is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just kind of gotta, it's hands off. It's like you do the best to create opportunities, and people are going to chew on and digest things at their own pace.
Yeah. Well, it's giving folks the opportunity like that, I think, is the really cool thing that you do, right? Is that I certainly feel, and again, I don't know. I haven't spent substantial portions of my life living in, you know, really different cultures, you know, like India or Japan, you know, where I know from things I've read or learned or from like pop culture and media that, like, you know, they think about death very differently, you know, than, you know, modern Americans do, right? There's different rituals, there's different practices along the way. Like I mean, even like when you said the phrase good death, you know, he's going to be listening to this, so he's going to make fun of me for it later. But my father-in-law, Jason, he really loves like samurai culture.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and the history and the tradition and, you know, all these things and, you know, the warrior ethos of feudal Japan. And so we have a book in our house that's like Japanese death poems, because it was a tradition for a lot of samurai to like compose a poem that you would read before your death, because they often would die in ritual fashion, right?
Yeah.
Like to commit suicide in
Right.
a very particular way.
I did not know that.
Well, there's a whole, that's just one
mean,
example.
sure.
I'm sure that there's like you know, that what I'm trying to get at, Laura, is like, you know, do you have any views or opinions on like, you know, I feel like we do this bad culturally, you know, as America, like we systemically don't talk about death in a way that I feel like other cultures, I think maybe they do a better job of it. So do you have any sense of that? Like, do you have knowledge of that? Or do you ever have people come to the club who are like, you know, I'm from a different country and this is a thing that, you know, my family, I remember, used to do? Like, I don't know. I'm curious about that. If you have any thoughts.
So I haven't done gobs of research on other cultures. What I do believe is true, that we're not alone in North America
Yeah.
as not doing this very well, because there's organizations, like there's death cafes, if you will, like all over the world.
Really?
That was started in London as an opportunity for people to talk about death. So it is something that people are wanting to do. But I do believe the piece that has gotten us so wrapped around the axle is that modern medicine, this is my personal opinion, is I have a complicated relationship with modern medicine.
Sure.
I've seen it provide years and decades for people's lives, quality of life.
Yeah.
But modern medicine it makes things complicated. And okay, when do we draw the line?
Yeah.
And given that our medical professionals are self-admitted that they're not really comfortable talking about death,
Right.
but they want to talk about extending our lives, nobody's saving our lives.
Yeah.
I look at me personally. If somebody were to save my life, they would have pulled me out of a burning building.
Right.
Or out of like a car wreck.
Yeah.
You know, that's again, my personal opinion. So when the first time that we're talking about things is in the doctor's office, it's just really kind of, we're at feeling our worst, the most stressed. I think that kind of stretches a lot of cultures right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're in a little bit of misery loves company.
Yeah.
In a lot of modern societies. I think also we lack ritual.
Oh.
Ritual
Yeah.
in the dying process. We've lost our agency. Back to the Civil War when embalming started, and I think that was definitely the snowball of where we are today. And there's so much that I think that if people understood what all their options truly are, we probably would be opting to do things differently as opposed to just default to the things that the generation before us just did.
Yeah.
Same thing kind of like with the food,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Things
Totally.
comes around, goes around.
I had never thought about that, like this is a show about optimism, progress, problem solving in New Hampshire, right? And so I often find myself rattling off statistics to people about like, people are living healthier, longer, better lives, right, today than in the past. And you're pointing out that, hey, the fact that that's true for like most people around the world presents a shared challenge, right? In that whatever history or cultural practices you have around, healthcare, end of life care, death, it didn't evolve in a time when, with modern medical technology, right? Which, as you say, can present great opportunities, but also difficult, moral, ethical quandaries around what people desire and what they're comfortable with in, the last predicted, years of their life potentially, or, all the kinds of situations that come from that. Like, I never thought about that.
It is our ability. Our ability when we engage with our doctors, first of all, like this is nothing about doctors. I think our system, I'm not alone, that, when you have 15 minutes to have an interaction, there's only so much your medical professional. It's horrible. and
it's bad. It sucks.
It's bad. It's bad.
I think most people would want it to be different than that.
And there's a lot going on. And so we've created this mechanism that doesn't support us to have our agency. and our ability to sit back and just like, okay, are these really all my options? What happens if I do nothing? What does that look like? Oh, you mean the do nothing? And then this over here is probably like the same outcome? Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, can we talk about that?
Yeah.
And, or, time. So, and yeah, modern medicine has, and the business of pharmaceuticals and medical device and all these things. I used to also work for a medical device company.
Sure.
And when we were, still are, developing a device for pulsatile flow when you go through cardiac open heart surgery. And I just know it's like, wow, we are doing something super important right now. And it is going to cause less problems for somebody with this modality than what currently exists. It is a really good feeling.
Yeah.
And then one thinks about, okay, all the other things that, again, extend our lives that good, but let's just recapture what is all the important things. And is extending our life, are we still doing it quality? If so, cool.
Right.
And if not, what's the impact on that? What is the burden to self, to family, and to finances?
Right.
There's some, it is a holistic thing. It's not just, do you want this surgery? Do you want this chemo? Do you want this treatment? Is how is that really going to impact my ecosystem as a person and as the people around me?
Well, it's like, I feel like our culture hasn't caught up to the technology, right? That's kind of how I think of it, of like, hey, obviously there's, I think, people who work in medicine and do the research, and like, it's a good thing. We want people living longer, healthier, happier lives. Like, who is against that, right? But I don't know that, we've made all these advances while maybe not talking openly about, okay, but you are still going to die. How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
I don't know that those two things, and I feel like you're making great progress on the cultural side, which is like in many ways more important, frankly.
And those are some of the things that we talk about at this monthly event that we host.
I was going to ask, walk me through an event.
Yeah, so Death Over Drinks is open to anybody. It's free. We do it once a month right now in Portsmouth and Kennebunk, Maine. And coming up in a few weeks, Brattleboro, Vermont.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. I'm talking to people.
They're dying up there.
I know. People are dying everywhere. And they're dying to have Death Over Drinks because they also believe, as do I, in the practical wisdom that people have, but we don't tap into it because we're not talking about it.
Yeah.
So we believe that people have these insights, and we just need to talk about them and tap into them. So it's not the first time you're having those conversations.
Right.
But Death Over Drinks, we welcome people. It's a facilitated event. People break out into groups of 5 to 9 people, and we give icebreaker questions. One of the icebreaker question that we did was asked people, what is the importance? How important is language when we're talking about death, dying, and end of life? For example, asked folks, everybody know what DNR stands for? Mm-hmm. Do not resuscitate, right? And then I asked, anybody know what AND stands for? Do you?
Another drink, please.
Allow natural death.
Ah.
So
I don't even know what that means. Like, I've never heard that.
Allow natural death. I did not either. I had a conversation with the head of emergency medical technology at Exeter Hospital, and he told me about this 2 years ago. He goes, it's a medical term. I go, really?
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, the medical community is a little conflicted about it. And I'm like, why? It is such a beautiful way to say allow natural death.
Yeah.
And so part of the conversation that particular night, we were talking about when it feels okay to say, like, do not resuscitate is kind of a negative.
Yeah.
Like, Andy, EMTs come in, do not resuscitate.
Yeah.
It feels like I'm taking something away from you.
Right. Yeah.
As opposed
don't help
to
them. Right.
allow natural death.
Yeah.
This is what this person wants.
I didn't even put those together that those were the same thing.
It's exactly.
I didn't even realize that. Until
It's
just now.
exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And so this discussion was, okay, if my 8-year-old was having a medical emergency, I would not necessarily feel comfortable saying allow natural death,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
If my 85-year-old dad was having a medical emergency and I was clear that he was fine, like, I'm cool, don't put me through this, allow natural death is such a much more beautiful thing
Yeah.
to say, that you are supporting somebody's wishes as opposed to holding a life-saving, it's really a life-extending
Yeah.
procedure. So anyhow, very fruitful, very impactful discussion that people walked away with, oh, I think when I want to communicate with my loved ones, that I'm good to say, please just allow my natural death, even though I might need a DNR form.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's the bureaucracy.
There's forms.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man.
It's complicated. We've got the legal aspect of things, and then we've got the medical aspect, and we've got the personal aspect.
Yeah.
And the family and the community aspect.
Yeah.
And I mean, for the 2 years, I mean, Pre-Dead Social Club formed March of 2023, so almost 2 years.
But it's been incubating
It's
for
been
a very
incubating.
long time.
I know. It's true.
All these people were waiting for it. They just didn't know it. And you were too.
I think it's percolated right at the right time.
Yeah. Well, it is in my view, because, I mean, it's always the right time, right? But a recurring theme of the show, right, is like the big challenges, Granite State, what's going on, right? Everyone always talks about demographics. We're one of the older states. I think one of the oldest states.
I
in the
think
whole
Maine
country.
is the oldest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
We're neighbors.
It's a it's a 3-headed dragon between Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont for who's like, it's all the same, more or less, in terms of that challenge, right? But this is, I view your work as a real beacon of light, and it's a total, like, I think when most people hear that, they're like, oh, the state's getting old, so it means it's, whatever, less innovative.
Fallow.
Yeah, fallow, right? Brittle.
I don't know. Yeah.
And we have all this, like, we could have a whole other talk about, like, the baggage that we associate with.
I don't mean fallow,
age.
by the way. I don't describe it that way.
Yeah.
I'm just playing.
No, I think you're a
into
very,
your conversation
you're a very
there.
age positive person.
Yeah.
I feel, but we like the built-in association is one of negativity, right? And I don't like that. And both things can be true in terms of, like, hey, there's a literal distribution of resources and incomes, of, like, working people supporting retired people, and there's an optimal, arrangement of that for, like, our society to work well. And great, that's a whole other challenge. But allowing, the existing or soon to be predominant demographic, right, of elderly people who are approaching the end of their lives to, approach and live in that phase with dignity, comfort, and, agency, right? Yeah, that's the word.
Agency.
That's the word. Like, that's a big deal.
It
feels like a big priority.
Well, agency, and to be able to advocate for yourself, and to advocate for yourself when you don't feel good, and you might not have anybody there to be your
advocate.
your advocate,
Yeah.
your other set of ears and eyes. I don't know how some people navigate that and negotiate those things.
Yeah.
It's I will say that we realize that not everybody wants to talk about death.
Sure.
All right. So even though our our tagline is keeping the dialogue alive.
Yeah.
We have incubated other, it's a good word.
Well, you did use it like an egg, sperm, and
Yeah.
like there's all these. We're going deep into it. We may as well.
We're just keeping that,
We're stewing
that visual
in the
alive.
life cycle.
That's
you know?
right.
Yeah.
So we've created different opportunities for people to write, deadlines, which is a creative obituary writing workshop.
Yeah.
A wing making workshop, a death wing making workshop, so people can use their hands and
What
process.
is that?
We collaborated with an
Sounds
award-winning.
like a Batman character. I'm sorry.
No, it's here. I'll just show you.
Yeah, if you have literature, get it out. What is this?
So we collaborated with Bess Weldon, who is a Colby professor in theater, and she created a play called Death Wings. And it was her way of processing her dad's death, that she made this human-size set of wings using materials that were relative to him. It could be maps, could be poetry, materials from shirts and things.
Yeah.
And it was her ritual for that. And she's created workshops for other people whom the way to process a death of any kind is through their hands.
Right.
Right. We also are collaborating. I look at what we've created as the gym for death. That the more that people show up, the more like limber that they get.
That's
like,
right.
yeah, oh yeah, I can, like, yeah, let's have another conversation. It's like, all right, what else you got? You know, and they just they get more confidence, and they build a little bit more emotional and emotional and relationship muscle with themselves and perhaps other people. But we're also very, very interested in bridging the gaps that exist with our medical providers.
Sure.
So we created a roundtable discussion for people to be in the audience, listening to, like, last year we did We Wish We Knew That, and it was about palliative and hospice care.
Yeah.
Very misunderstood of how that serves people. This year we're going to be launching an author meet and greet virtually of different books for people. So it is a lot of, again, sperm, egg.
Yeah.
A lot of different ways for people to receive information, to hear conversations. We're going to be doing a program called I'm Practically Dying. And it's all about, there's a humor, we try to have humor in a little bit of everything, to have people, like, just a little disarming. It's like, okay, we actually don't do a lot of anything on grief. There's tons of opportunities for people to tap into that. It's like, we're really, our mission is to hopefully have these conversations long before a life-altering or terminal diagnosis. So you're like, okay, I can tap into some resources of what I have, and you don't feel like you're just starting from ground zero in a sticky spot.
Yeah. Can I ask a kind of personal question?
Yeah.
I'm curious. So you've been doing the club for 2 years, right?
Just under 2 years.
Just under 2 years. Have you had people who have come to the club and then have passed away? Like, has that happened yet? Or even people in their lives right now?
Yeah, there are people. This is a great question. So I gave you the age aspect of people show up and they have shared. This is not like an announcement. You know, nobody gets up and says, but people have shared that they have a stage 4 terminal of something.
Wow.
Or they've been diagnosed with something that will be a life-altering diagnosis that will very much alter
change
their
things.
quality of their life. We have people that have joined us because they are in the midst of caregiving for their elderly parents, either currently in their home or remotely,
Right.
and then dealing navigating. I don't like the word dealing. Navigating,
Right.
negotiating with family members and siblings. We have folks that have shown up that they have just been on the tail end of all of that, and they need somewhere to process, and they enjoy the ability to be in company with other people that are comfortable. Somebody asked me the other day. So basically, what I'm trying to say is, it's the spectrum.
Right. Yeah. There's all kinds of
And there,
change
and there are people
happening.
who are really proactive,
Right.
and they're proactive. And I say everybody has a death story,
Right.
Everybody has their why. You probably have a death story, and you might think about what your most recent death is, but chances are, if you go back in time, all of those death stories have stacked up and made you either comfortable or uncomfortable. This is not black and white like this.
Yeah.
Or, ooh, I want to do something exactly like that. That was so inspiring.
Yeah.
Or, ooh, I want to avoid that because that was really hard.
Right.
Right. So, yeah, people are plugging in based upon all of that. And somebody asked the other day, well, what do you do about the people that don't want to talk about death? I go, that's maybe they'll come around at some point in time.
Do people show up and then not want to talk about death?
You know, we do these things called community agreements for Death Over Drink. So we lay some groundwork. Nobody is an expert on death. You participate at your comfort level, and if there's a tender moment, we honor it. We're not here to give anybody advice.
Yeah.
We can talk about, we can share stories. And
And this isn't a clinical environment.
it's not a
right?
clinical
Yeah.
environment, even though we have facilitators. Our
Yeah.
facilitators, it's a hybrid model that they also participate. They're just there to we want to be able to hear from everybody. And we also just listen, there are people who have shown up that is I would just like to, observe.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure by the end of the 45 minutes that we're actually dialoguing, that people have chimed in,
Right.
Yeah, that's what I can share with you
Yeah.
about that. But there's zero pressure.
Well, another kind of question related to that would be anonymously, of course, but and you've already said things tantamount to this, but are there stories or people that have come to it who you feel man, I've seen a real transformation of they showed up, they did not want to talk about it, or coming to this group has really, really helped them, or even someone who's come and been this changed the way that my family approached this, right? I don't want to say success story because it's that's not, I don't think that's the right way to think about it, but transformations, right?
I have heard people have described the process as it's given them more courage to have these conversations. And I think it's perhaps also given people courage to have the conversation knowing that you don't need to receive anything back. But to be able to have your voice to be heard and to say, hey, Andy, I would like to talk to you. Let's say you're my son. I would like to talk to you about some things that are important to me at the end of life. And you're like, well, Mom, not so comfortable. I'm like, cool. You don't have to talk. I go, all I'm asking is give me 5 minutes. I just want to share this thing, catalog it somewhere. And it's oh, okay. And people are learning different strategies. I'm just trying to think. There are so many. I think again,
You've
it's
already given me plenty of good examples.
Yeah, it's a marathon.
Yeah.
People are in training, and I think the thing that I have seen the most is people are okay, what's next? Oh yeah, we do want to have this conversation, and they raise their hand. It's yes, we would like to have a book club. So people are activated. I have not done a survey, which would be kind of that would be an awesome thing. Perhaps maybe we'll do that at year 2.
Yeah.
You know, is for folks that have been
Even just a demographic survey, right?
You know, and just say what's been the positive. We've got testimonials, but you know, just cross section of what has made a positive impact.
Yeah.
Well, we did do. I was at a conference last weekend called Midlife up in Midcoast, Maine, and
That's fun.
Yeah, Midlife and Midcoast.
Puns everywhere. In
Right?
this space.
I know. And they wanted me to come and talk about death and dying. So I put on a program called Who Cares? A little provocative.
Yeah.
It's proactive, it's reactive, it's for the curious, and it was all about how we approach caregiving and how do we approach having that conversation with our loved ones proactively as well as reactively. And people were blown away by the tool that we gave them. They're like, this is so helpful. And I'm like, I know that you might get pushback on whomever you want to share this to, that you have is like, this person's probably going to need care long before I will.
Right.
But if you lead with, hey, if I were, because anything can happen, need care in the next year, this is who I would like, who I believe is capable and willing in some of these areas. And this is where I would rather pay for care.
Right.
You know, it's like have this open-ended discussion. So we're creating opportunities for people to rethink how you do this
Yeah.
in a team aspect.
Yeah.
Death is an event. Dying is a process.
I like that.
Yeah. And we talk about death, but we're really, if we're really listening in these conversations, I would say the vast majority of people are not afraid of death. They're really afraid of this dying process because of the things that we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And this is picking away at it.
Yeah.
And like, if when I started the Pre-Dead Social Club, I didn't think I was going to give a session and actually have huge efforts. We've workshopped this with 200 people so far on caregiving, but caregiving is an epidemic at the
Yeah.
moment. And if we go back to the phrase "good death," not because I like that phrase, but
Right.
as a death doula, if part of my job, my mission is to support people to die in their terms, you have to think about the caregiving because that's part of dying.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Makes total sense.
Yeah. So, it's amazing the amount of, I brought this. This is the Who Cares.
Oh.
And if I can, should I just read this?
Yeah, read it. Go ahead.
It says, the more we grasp the scope of caregiving, the more we're able to navigate with confidence and clarity around end of life or during a life-altering diagnosis. We've lost...
For the proactive, reactive, and curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you can pick this up at any time.
Right.
And death is an event. Dying is a process. Both have the ability to be influenced by decisions we make or we don't make.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we've lost sight that dying is a life skill. Dying is a life skill.
Yeah.
And we need, we tap into all those aspects to get to a certain point, hopefully, to die in our own terms, and that we don't leave just a mess in our wake.
Yeah. That seems considerate.
It's well,
Yeah.
and hopefully more peaceful.
Right.
Yeah, I just think that the Pre-Dead Social Club has put a bunch of pebbles in the water, and there's a bunch of ripples going out, and people are picking up on it. And like, how do we bring some of these programs to our community?
Yeah.
And we're making those wheels in place to thoughtfully connect with community. We're talking about death, but we're rebuilding community.
Right.
This is not a medical conferences or meetings. It's community building.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I go to the Hannaford or grocery store. It's like, I know you. You're a pre-debtor.
Right.
You know, I saw you at Death Over Drinks. Cool.
Yeah.
You know, I now see other people in my world that are navigating this as well. Yeah, it's comforting.
Yeah. Laura, how has doing the Pre-Did Social Club changed you? Are there any personal reflections that you feel like have come to light as a result of you doing it?
Yeah. If anybody
Yeah.
would have, if anybody, first of all, would have said, you're going to be talking about death a lot in your, midlife. And I'm like, really? The more I dig into the subject of death, dying, and end of life, the more I reflect on what I fill my life with. And it's like, not so important. I should be doing this other should. It would be more important for me to spend my time over here, because literally, if I die in the next year, I'd look back and say, why did you do that?
Yeah.
So it's a slow process. I'm not saying that all of a sudden I just switch a light bulb and I'm living my best life. I'm living infinitely more intentionally than perhaps I did 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm just going to get overclamped right now. That just
You're okay.
comes out of nowhere sometimes.
sure.
I'm having some of the most impactful conversations with my dad that I never thought I would have. And I believe that is filling both of us up in different ways. Yeah, being able to talk about something tender that it has sad moments, but we're navigating together, is awesome. And I think also my partner, Jeff, the first Death Over Drinks that he went to, he was really hesitant. And after that, he's like, oh my God, that was so much fun. When are we doing that again? So
Take me back.
Yeah, I know. So it has touched me many ways.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your authenticity and your vulnerability and your work. Our last question.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to keep you too long. What, and you've given me plenty already. What makes you optimistic about your work or the future of it?
Love that question.
The fact that people show up.
No, like I just think about that I have not done almost any advertising
Wow.
in 2 years.
Yeah.
I think I've barely reached out to the medical community.
Yeah.
These are people who want to have these conversations, and they're at all stages of their life in all different situations. And they not only show up once, they show up multiple times, and they tap like the gym. They show up when they can
Yeah.
with their schedule and they need it. And they're sharing what they're learning, what they're experiencing with other people. And people are reaching out from all different parts of the country, which I find pretty fascinating, given that we're not really all that prolific on social media. But
It means that someone's looking for it.
yeah,
you know,
and also
and finding you.
the genuineness is there.
Yeah. The authenticity.
The authenticity
Yeah.
of it. So what makes me excited is that people literally just keep showing up and getting excited, and they're joyful for these opportunities.
Yeah.
And to get their brain working and their heart working on something that they know that they're going to be able to use down the road.
Laura,
Andy,
it's been a real pleasure. I could talk to you forever.
thank you for the dialogue.
Thank you for the dialogue. We have to have you back on.
What was that?
I said I have to have you back on. I feel like we just scratched the surface.
We have just scratched the surface.
What do you love? You were gonna say?
No, I very much appreciate your enthusiasm and that you recognize this as something important in not only the Granite State, which I love your enthusiasm for shining a light on things that lift people up. So thank you.
There's lots of it.
Yeah, there is a lot of it.
Thanks for doing the work.
Thanks, Andy.
Hey there, thanks for spending some time with us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can learn more about today's guest and how to get involved with or support their work in the show notes. If you'd like to suggest a guest for the show or have any story tips for our Good News in New Hampshire newsletter, shoot me a message at hello@granitegoodness.com. Music for this episode was provided by the band Sneaky Miles, who hail from Newmarket, New Hampshire. Until next time, I'm the creator and host of Granite Goodness, Andy DeMeo. Thanks for listening.